Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of the Strength Coach Podcast, episode 298.5. Obviously, always brought to you by Perform Better. Check them out at PerformBetter.com. All right, today, like I said, special episode. Want to talk about my buddy's new book I have on Brendon Rearick of Movement as Medicine, Certified Functional Strength Coach, and Train Smarter and Harder. He graduated from the University of Mass in Amherst with a degree in kinesiology, but really, he made his way at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, and over the last 11 years, he's opened up a massage business with Kevin Carr, Movement as Medicine, launched an education company, which is Certified Functional Strength Coach. He spoke at conferences both domestically and internationally for Perform Better, created his first product, Building Exercise Checklists, wrote a book, which is what we're going to talk about today, Coaching Rules, a how-to manual for a successful career in strength and fitness, and he opened an adult fitness and sports performance facility, Train Smarter and Harder Gym, with his wife, Jenny, in Brentwood, California. Brendon, thanks for coming on and doing this.
Well, thanks for having me. That was a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a surprise you have any time in the day with all these, because these are not things that you did. These are things that, you're kind of still doing right now. So it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to be doing it. So
I want to touch on that later not too much later, because I want to talk about your mission, because in your bio you have your mission, and I've been on a mission to talk about missions lately, because I think it's so important. So one of the first things we do in my book, in the workbook, because I arranged the be likes to kind of reflect how I would want them done in an order, although the book isn't so much like that, but I feel it's so important to get this mission and get this map going. And your mission, your personal mission, is to spread the positive byproducts of coaching and movement using strength and conditioning as a platform. And your career mission, before you retire, is to make physical activity the most commonly prescribed drug in the world. That's obviously what all these different companies are doing. And this is really what the book is really kind of starts to check that box, because I always say, once you find your mission, it helps you answer a lot of questions. Talk to us about you really when you kind of went on and sort of to do your mission or think about your mission, both personal and career mission, and how you came up with it.
Yeah, and these two missions are a direct reflection of everything that you had just gone through. Starting out at Mike Boyle's, and then which led to the opening of Movement as Medicine, which is a movement therapy or massage therapy clinic that Kevin and Carr and I opened 7 years ago now, as part of, and that was really where the first mission you mentioned was to spread the positive byproducts of coaching and movement as far as we can. That's what Kevin and I wanted to do with Movement as Medicine, and that's what we've continued to do, and that's grown into what it has. So that then led to, a few years later, us starting Certified Functional Strength Coach with Coach Boyle and Kevin Larrabee, and that was just, okay, that's the next progression in our pursuit of this mission, is to now educate, because if I can help one coach who has 10 people, then I've helped essentially kind of have had a hand in helping 10 others. If I can coach 100 people who have 10 coaches, that's 1,000 people I might have affected, as opposed to just my inner circle of 30 people that I'm training in groups and personal training, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, it's a great way to begin a career. It's how you have to begin your career. But to pursue these missions, I went Movement as Medicine first, which is really what started that, after working at Coach Boyle's, Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, and interning there and working there for 3 to 4 years We then launched the massage business, which led to Mike asking us to help him with running Certified Functional Strength Coach, which then led to Coach Boyle helping us, Kevin and I, get onto the Perform Better circuit. And now I've spoke at 5 summits over the last 5 years. So that's another way for me to use strength and conditioning as my platform to spread the positive byproducts of coaching and movement. And then the more people that I help, the more I get to making exercise the number one prescribed drug in the world, which is my retirement goal. And in the book, I mention the end goals or the missions of people like Steve Jobs was to put a dent in the universe, which is like, that's such a ridiculous mission statement, but Steve Jobs really did put a dent in the universe through and used Apple as his platform to do it. Bill Gates' mission was to put a PC on every desk, and that he said that in 1980 was to have a PC, a personal computer on every desk. And now most people have 2 or 3 personal computers, but they're not on their desks anymore. They carry them around with them everywhere. And then JFK was to put a man on the moon, and he did that. So I was like, what would be my really, like, I think Peter Drucker calls it, what's your like bold statement or your bold end goal? And if I'm going to be doing this for 55 years, if I retire in 1955, that would be 46 years in the training industry. What do I want my legacy to be? And I want it to be that exercise is the number one drug prescribed in the world, which means that healthcare doesn't look at it as just a preventative thing anymore. They look at it as the thing or the drug of choice for most people to, along with using medications and healthcare, but it's the drug of choice to combat many of these diseases that are afflicting the world right now, not just the United States, mostly the United States, but the world. So then that led to the opening of the gym with my wife, because when I left MBSC, I was still personal training people. I like to tell people that in a perfect world, I would have 30% training clients, and with 70% of working on business and online type stuff. Because I still want to have my hand in that cookie jar, because I feel like if I'm not seeing people and I'm not working with people, then I lose touch a little bit, especially with the writing piece. I mean, I think when the people who have read this book, you can see my passion that comes through the book, because I still live it every day, and I still coach and teach and have my own clients. So I'm not writing this from a perspective of this is what I did 20 years ago and it worked. This is what I'm currently doing and what I found to work for me from experience. And then finally, the book that we're here to talk about. This book is the book that I wish I had in my hands when I started coaching 11 years ago. And to a young coach, I want this book to be a platform to begin a new career. I want you to get out of the gate running, which is why it's a how-to book, and there's not a lot of theory. It's straight to the point. The rules tell you exactly what to do. They're guardrails, right? They're not substitutes for not thinking for yourself or going out and learning new things, but it's a nice guardrail to keep you on the path for a little while before you go off the path. And then for a seasoned coach, this book, I think, will give you a few subtle reminders, maybe some fresh perspective, and maybe a little reassurance that you are not alone in your thinking, especially for career coaches. This book was not written for people who view coaching as a job, who are looking at this as a stepping stone to getting to what people might call their real job, which say, they like working out and they like being in the gym, but they're not looking to do it for the rest of their life, which the book is written for career trainers. So again, if I am going to retire in 2055 as my retirement year at 65, that would be 46 years of training and coaching in the fitness industry. So I better have some pretty good rules and guidelines that are kind of my shining light to make sure that I don't, we'll talk about my 6 things that lead to an unsuccessful career, we'll say. But that way I can stay on my path and use this book as a guiding light in case I ever fall off the path.
Yeah, and that's the important part of this, is that why I've been on the mission to talk about missions, is because it really is that map for your career. And it is that start with the end in mind. I mean, you did mention, your the end of your career 3 or 4 times in that right there. And obviously you have a clear path. Now, are you going to venture off it once in a while? Yeah. But like I said, your mission answers a lot of questions. And I would have, before this interview, I would have questioned you and said, look, is opening the training facility and training people, is that really part of your mission? Like, because you are making a much more, you're affecting many more people, you're impacting many more people with CSFC and Movement as Medicine, with the content you provide them now with the book. And I would have thought, because I've said the same thing for me, as why I sold my brick and mortar, because I said, I want to make I'm making a large impact with the podcast and TrainCoach.com and Train Coach TV at the time. And so I felt like I want to expand on those. And the training was kind of getting in the way, although I did keep my foot in training with like 6 to 10 sessions a week. So it's kind of, I felt like you did. I felt like I needed to do that to stay relevant, to ask the right questions, to keep up to date with things. But in the past, I would have said, Brent, I don't know, maybe you should think about not opening that gym. But you really, if you have a why, then it's fine.
Yeah, and if I'm thinking of using the gym as a platform to spread the positive byproducts of all the other things that I'm doing. So this means that I can use the brick and mortar, the gym that my wife and I opened, as a way to continue to produce presentations, to produce books to write, to test, right? I'm using it to test and retest things that we're talking about in the Strength Coach Forum, things that my friends are asking me questions about, things that people ask me in the Certified Functional Strength Coach course, courses that I take myself, or somebody sends me a product and I want to try it out. That's what I'm using the gym as a platform for all of these other things as well. So like I said, I don't want to do more than 30% of it anymore. In the book, I actually say, do you want to be 55 years old, waking up at 5 a.m. to train one-on-one clients and working until 7 p.m.? I mean, that's not what I envision my 50s being like. Totally has to happen in your 20s and maybe your 30s. But if you want to make it a career, that's not really sustainable in my mind, especially if we're talking about keeping motivation high and an energy high, to be able to do this for a long time. And I mean, that's why I think Mike has the following that he does as well still, is that he's still coaching. He's not coaching like he was in his 30s and 40s, where he was doing BU, he was doing the Boston Red Sox, he had groups at Boyles, he had a big staff that he was training continuously. He's got other people to do that stuff for him now, but he's still training Marky, he's still training the pro group, he's still on the forums, like asking people questions or fielding questions, and then going and testing it in the gym, using MBSC as his platform to then keep up with all these other products and his talks and stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree, because I think for me, I went back to doing some training because I really kind of miss it. I need to be around people. And so I'm not doing too many. I'm still right now, I'm only doing like maybe 6 to 10 sessions a week. But I really look forward to those sessions now where I used to be like, now I'm getting tired. Or like you said, when you had the split shift back in the day. And, in my presentation for Perform Better, I talk about what Geraldine Cooper Smith talked about was this clear trajectory that we all have. In that first year, we're all excited. In the second year, we're like completely booked and we're still like, woo, we're making a lot of money. And then we plateau and then we kind of start to work those hours and we get burnt out. And then we start to get angry after that and start to hate the job and the people and get tired of working with people. So I think that's where you got to find, that a little bit of that balance. So, this is, like you said, this is one way to do it. You wrote Coaching Rules, the how-to manual for a successful career in strength and fitness. And it now gives you more opportunity to talk to people about things, about, how you're doing things and to keep relevant as well. That's another important part because you want to keep, if you want to impact those lives, you have to keep relevant. And so talk to us about like where, where this really came from. Not that I know obviously you want to impact a lot of people, but with writing a book, not everybody wants to write a book. I never realized I would write a book. It wasn't something on my bucket list. It just kind of came about. Was it like that for you?
It's funny you asked that because last night Kevin and I did a webinar and Kevin said the same thing. He's like, I never thought I would ever write a book in my life, and especially one that he wrote on anatomy. I always knew I was going to write a book or that I wanted to write a book. I just didn't know what I wanted to write about. And I'm kind of the mindset, I believe it's a Ben Franklin quote, that if you want to be a writer, have something to write about. And I knew I wanted to be a writer. I just didn't know what about yet. And it's taken me 11 years, but I figured out what I want. I knew what I wanted to write about after I was running the MBSC internship with Kevin Carr. And I wrote an article for the incoming summer interns. There was 24 interns coming in, and I wrote a article, 34 things I wish I had known before I started at Mike Boyle's Strength and Conditioning. I wanted to give everyone a leg up. I wanted everyone to know that Mike doesn't like when the ladders are tangled. So if you see a tangled ladder, untangle it. That the slide boards go back against the wall a certain way, because if they don't go back correctly, they bend in half, and then you have to buy new slide boards. The 100-pound plates never come off the sleds. The 100-pound plates only stay on the sleds. So like simple little rules that really do change the way the gym runs, the way we work, the way everybody feels about coming to work that day. And when I wrote that and Mike shared it, well, Mike actually presented it for the interns, and then he shared it on strengthcoach.com. And then I started building out a internship manual, which ends up actually becoming what everybody's going to see in this book, which is Coaching Rules. So I had 34 rules, which are all in here. And now it's been expanded to 105 rules. And I knew the layout that I wanted because, as you know, Mike has made his career on simplicity. And I really have taken to that kind of mindset, or that path, is that everybody tries to overcomplicate this. And I feel like maybe I'm going to take that baton from Mike here in the next few years, but my goal is to always simplify it so it's consumable for everybody. And when I read the book Food Rules by Michael Pollan, which is a brief, to the point, easy to digest book on nutrition, which is, I believe it's 64 rules, nutrition rules that are super, super simple. I knew that's the layout that I wanted for my book. So I knew I wanted to write a book that would help young coaches, and with the interns that I worked with at Mike Boyle's Strength and Conditioning in mind. And I knew I wanted it to be super simple rules that you could take and use immediately in whatever situation you're in. So that was the layout for the book. The internship was the inspiration for the book. And then Michael Pollan's food rules is, so he says in the book that if you don't even read the rules, if you need to know anything about nutrition, it's really, really simple. It's eat food, mostly plants, not too much. So if you can eat food and you can eat mostly plants and you don't eat too much food, you're probably going to be generally okay. Like, that's a pretty simplified nutrition statement that I think would help a lot of people. So I said, well, okay, what are my coaching rules? Like, I tried to bring it down to 3 things like Michael Pollan, but I couldn't do it. I tried. So I ended up with 4 things. So if you were going to ask me, like, what are the 4 things I need to do to be a good coach? Communicate clearly, keep it simple, do no harm, and serve others. And actually, serve others was don't make it about you. It was originally that, but then Laurie said that wasn't really actionable. So I said, okay, well then let's make it serve others then, which basically means don't make it about you. It's not about your workouts anymore. It's about their workouts. So if somebody asks me, what do I need to be a good coach? Communicate clearly, keep it simple, do no harm, and serve others. So communicate clearly is going to be more about your coaching presence, your coaching cues, the way you demo and teach. Keep it simple and do no harm are actually a combination that fall under writing a program. So in the book, I teach you how to write a program and audit your program. And then serve others is, as you mentioned, I talked a lot about what do I want my legacy to be? What do I want my coaching tombstone to say? There's a lot of that in serving others, because if I have that mission statement of what I want the people to say about me when I'm 80 years old about training with me, that will dictate a lot of the way that I live my life now and the way I coach now and what I put my energy into. So that's kind of how the book came about. That's the layout of the book. The one thing I will add is that each section, so there's 3 sections, has a deliberate practice section to it.
Very cool.
So
yeah, we need those actionable steps, or a little to give people guidance. You know, we talked about that's what I wanted to do in the book. My book was, hey, here's the interview, but here's something you can take away from the interview. Go try to do this now, and if you do 5 of these in the whole book, your life's going to change. And I think that's what, you know, with you is, you know, we'll go over some of those deliberate practices, but that if you're just going to read this book and not do these deliberate practices, you're not going to get what you should be getting out of this book. And I do love the way you structured the book, like you said, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, 4 different parts really, with communicate clearly, keep it simple, do no harm, and serve others. But also, there are all these little tidbits, like if you haven't read Food Rules, it's pretty easy. Hey, here's rule 4. I reserve the right to change my mind. And then you go over it, and you might maybe do once in a while you do a quote, but it's really easy. You don't have to read this whole thing in one sitting. And each one, you could really sit down and digest it and think about it, about how you're doing what you talk about in the rules. So the format is really easy to read, which is, to me, is really important.
Yeah, and that's exactly why. Again, my favorite part about Food Rules was how easy it was to digest, and that you read the rule, you can sit back, think about it, and go back and read the rule. You can also open this book anywhere and read that rule and get something from it.
Yes, that was important.
Also, yeah, with reading a book, it seems that with the times we're living in, the shorter maybe the better.
Yes.
Actually, one of my favorite books right now, or that I read every year, is The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, because it's 365 Stoic meditations that are basically just rules with a little bit, like at the length of an Instagram post underneath it. And I read that consistently every morning. And I think that's the big thing with this book too, is that it's something, if there's 105 rules, you could read the book in 105 days if you just consistently read one rule a day. It's not and you could read the whole book in an afternoon. I've had a few people do that, but I also have a couple people that are reading it one rule at a time, which is also an option as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always love this idea. You have to present the problem first, and we have to know the problem in order to find the solution. And you talk about the 6 biggest obstacles you'll face when pursuing success in this industry: complacency, egotism, poor communication, lack of connection, overcomplication, and client attrition. Talk to us about each one. Let's go over complacency.
So complacency, in one of my favorite books that I read last year was Peak by Anders Ericsson. And he opens the book with a study that they did with the best surgeons in the world and the not so best surgeons in the world. And what they found was that they followed the careers of, I can't remember how many surgeons it was, but they followed their careers. And at about year 5, everybody had like a steady incline of improvement because doing surgery made you better at doing surgery up to year 5. After year 5, the only surgeons who got better were the surgeons who deliberately practiced getting better at the surgery, which meant they reviewed tape on their surgery. They had other surgeons come in and watch them do the surgery and give suggestions, kept notes about the surgery and how it went, followed up with their patients. The surgeons who didn't do that actually got worse because they got complacent. They said, well, I've been doing this forever. I must be good at it. And so as a coach, I see this a lot with coaches and you mentioned this in the beginning, after year 3, you've been doing this for 3 years. You're like, I'm pretty busy. Like, I must be good at this now. Like, whatever. I can just kind of not pack it in, but like, I can just keep doing what I'm doing. And the coaches who want to do this for a career for a long time continue to go to continuing ed courses, spend 20% of their income on getting better every year. They have other coaches keep on them, or they have a group of coaches that they collaborate with that they continue. Like the Strength Coach Forum is perfect for this. You're testing your theories, you're continuing to get better, and you have that feedback from these people. And the coaches who don't do that, I would say, are complacent, and they actually get worse at coaching. So that complacency was the first problem that I saw really being the obstacle for being a successful coach.
Absolutely. Egotism is a big one. And I think we're seeing that more with social media.
Yeah. And so egotism, and actually I think 4 or 5 of my rules actually are social media rules, because the egotism comes through so clearly through what people post on their social media accounts. My number one rule is that you should post a 4-to-1 ratio. For every one post you make about yourself, or you make about a sale, or you post a picture of you in the gym working out, there should be 4 posts that are educational, that promote somebody else or champion somebody else's effort, and maybe it's a client or a friend, but don't, again, make it about others, serve others. It's not about you anymore. And if your ego gets in the way, you don't have a very long career ahead of you. And there's a lot of people in the industry who get worked up about I don't know what you want to call them, but the trainers who post pictures of themselves pretty much half naked, look at my 6-pack, look at how big my glutes are. And some of those people are making a lot of money by selling booty programs and get 6-pack ab programs. And I'm not mad about it. I'm not worried about those people. Those are not career trainers, because at some point they lose the six pack, they lose the booty. At some point, the consumer figures out this person is full of it. So again, I didn't write that book for those people, but my hope is that somebody reads some of these serve others rules and they realize, ooh, maybe my ego is getting in the way of my ability to help more people. And the more people you help, this is actually my last and final rule number 105 is the more people I help, the more successful it seems I become. And if you really put that at the forefront, then I would guess that half the stuff that people post on social media, they wouldn't post. One of the rules is that if you were to, what you were about to post was going to be front page of the New York Times, would you post it? Right? If it's a picture of you getting your sweat on and flexing in the mirror and it says, don't you want to be my client? I don't know. You're making yourself the hero of the story when you really should be making your clients the hero of the story, in my opinion, if this is something that you want to do for the next 40 years.
Yeah,
egotism was second. Yeah.
I think that number one woman, I forget her name. It's like Kayla something. I think she's Australian. I'm not positive. She's written a couple books. She's like pretty much the number one on Instagram. The funny thing is, like, she basically has minimum 1 to 3 or 4 of testimonials about like other people saying, hey, this program was great, blah, blah. It's about them and how she served them. So it's a great point. I think I just wanted to mention about egotism too, is I think that gets in the way in terms of complacency as well. Like you talked about before, like, hey, I've been doing this for a while. I don't really need to go and see Brendon Rearick talk about his checklist. Like I've been training a lot longer than him, or like there's always new things that you can learn. So I think that is another thing. And you know, it's also in terms of, do you have an ego where you're going to allow somebody to come in and critique you, like you even talk about in your deliberate practice, which we'll go over in a little bit. But yeah, like allowing criticism. Like somebody actually said something about my book, and I was like, you know what, she's right on that. And I knew that going in, and you got to be okay with it. If you can't stand the heat, man, you got to get out of the kitchen. But I did want to mention that. But and this is number 3, poor communication. I can't. I don't know if this is the most important, but if you're a poor communicator, you will not go very far in this business.
Yeah, and actually, so poor communication and lack of connection, right? Because if you can't communicate, you can't connect either. So those two really go together. And I always go back to what Coach Boyle said. I remember him saying this when I first started working there, guys, 11 years ago, was that a great coach with a mediocre program will always do better than a mediocre coach with the perfect program or a great program. So even if the coach doesn't have the best equipment, the best exercises, if they're a damn good coach and they can get you to buy in and get you motivated and make you want to do what it is you're supposed to do and coach you up and teach you, demo it as best they can, then you're going to get a lot more out of that coach who's the great coach with the bad program than you are some mediocre coach with the best program and the best equipment, all the turf, 10,000 square feet of gym. Like, I'll always take the great coach over the program or the equipment. So that's really what it comes down. And we have a lot of PhD types and research types and we need those people, but we don't necessarily want to take their communication style and bring that to the gym floor. So actually a couple of my rules are, don't use the big terminology, don't use abbreviations, don't say the latissimus dorsi, right? Your clients don't use external or internal rotation, try to use external cues as much as you can. So there's a lot of stuff, again, where we're reading thing, like, because a lot of fitness books are very theory based and they're very science based, and they need to be. You need to know both of those things, which is why I wrote a how-to manual, because there weren't a lot of like, okay, how do I apply this to an actual live human being? And it's to not use the scientific words. Like you and I, to have a discussion, Anthony, might use the terminology of extensor, flexor, internal, external, the anatomical names. We could use abbreviations, like, you know what PRI is. My clients have no idea what any of that stuff is. So there's a big difference when you bring the how-tos to the gym floor. And so that's what I was trying to get through with my how should I coach. It's communicate clearly, and that if you cannot communicate or convey those things in a way that's simple, a lot of people aren't going to work with you or have success working with you, because they're not going to understand what it is you're asking them to do. And then also there's if I don't want to have a beer with you, if you're an asshole, you could probably be an asshole for 2, 3, 4 sessions, but you're going to have a lot of turnover, because if I don't want to spend an hour with you, I'm not going to want to give you $100. I don't care how smart you are or how many books you've read. If I don't like you, I'm not going to want to train with you. And that's that.
Yeah, so true. I mean,
part of it's the relationship you build as well.
Absolutely. And I think this is really, I actually wrote an article for strengthcoach.com about it, it's a really important part that we have to be conscious about, because I think too many people focus on marketing, and so they're worried about getting new clients when you already have clients, and you're not focusing on, are you giving everything you have to them? And that is, and if you're communicating poorly and you're not establishing these good connections like you talk about, then you're going to lose those people, right? That's going to be client attrition, which is coming up soon. But yeah, so I think in that sense as well, like you said, with the scientist type, you want to worry about that. It's important. Those things are important. Like marketing, it's very important. But to me, the number one thing is this idea about connection that I think we all really need to focus on. So let's go over the last two: overcomplication, which you kind of went over already a little bit, and then client attrition.
Right. And so overcomplication, again, we went over this a little bit. The people who make it harder than it needs to be, and part of getting better at training and being a coach is overcomplicating some things and learning from them. I think this is where I have the most stories in the book. I'll just use an example of when I took over the adult and athlete programming at MBSC. When we had a couple coaches move on, I took the programming over, and I remember the first week I wrote what I thought to be the best program in the entire world. And everyone started doing it, and we had 90 minutes to train. So we have an hour and a half with the athletes, and most of our coaches weren't even getting through 60% of the perfect program I wrote, because it was just, in theory, it made sense, but logistically, it did not work at all. Then the other thing I learned quickly was when I did the adult program, I had ropes, chin-ups, and deadlift all in the same circuit. And then I ended the workout with farmer carries. And the next time those adults came in, they literally most of them couldn't open their hands because their forearms were so shot, because I was not smart enough to do my own program, which is the suggestion. If you write a program, make sure you've done it before you give it to somebody. And so, yeah, sometimes we overcomplicate things, which I did very early in my career. And I learned from it. And I'm hoping that you read this book and you don't follow the same mistakes that I did.
I wanted to say one thing really quick on that was that story reminded me, Alan Cosgrove one time, he actually did a program that was in like the NSCA textbook. And he looked at it and he thought, this is really weird. This is way too long. And I think he figured it out, like where it would be like 6 hours to do this program because of like the 5-minute rest periods, and they weren't supersetting anything and all these crazy things that they'd put in this textbook. And it was totally like, you could tell the person who did it just put it in there, and it was all based on theory, and they never done it. So that kind of reminded me a little bit your story about the, it was like, 70, they weren't even close to being finished at that 90-minute mark.
No, we didn't even get through half of the strength training portion, and they still had conditioning left, and it was time for kids to go home. So their parents were showing up, and they weren't even halfway through the strength portion of the workout.
Brent, the client attrition one, before you talk about that, I just wanted to ask you about it a little bit. Like, I mean, this is one that I feel like, look, this is just something that's going to happen. I mean, people are going to move. People are going to get to certain goals. People are going to, financially, their financial situation is going to change. This one's a really hard one that's really, for the most part, there's a lot of uncontrollables.
Yes, totally, 100%. And maybe you want to set your expectations high, but you don't want to set them where you believe that you're going to be able to keep 100% of people happy for all the reasons that you mentioned. Sometimes there's things that are out of your control. I will say, though, that if you become complacent and you have a big ego and you can't communicate, and you lack connection or being able to build relationships, and you overcomplicate everything, you can assure yourself that you're going to have to find new clients every 3 months. Ideally, what you want to do is be able to keep 50% of your clientele year round, and that you're only ever looking for a couple spaces to fill, so that you're not, again, your people are going to move, things are going to happen. But if you can keep your schedule 50% filled, then you shouldn't be looking for a ton of people all the time. And I think the pandemic was, if we're looking at silver linings, the pandemic was the wrong time to start looking for new clients. The pandemic was the right time to over-deliver for the current clients that you already have. So you mentioned this kind of, but if you had been doing a great job, all the people and all the coaches that I know who are already really good at what they did, or they already provided a great service, didn't have a lot of client attrition. And some of them are still surviving. I was able to move a lot of my personal clients to online clients, and a lot of gyms were able to do that. Some were not able to do that. I understand that. But if you were already doing a great job beforehand because you were avoiding the things that we were talking about, you were avoiding complacency, the ego portion, you were communicating well, then you most likely did not lose all of your clients. So yeah, there's going to be attrition, but I think you should be able to keep 50% of your people year round. And if you have 2 or 3 clients that have been with you for longer than 3 years, you could probably put that on your scout badge, or on as a scout badge, that like, okay, I've got 2 or 3 people who've stayed with me for this long. I must be doing something right. So.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, because I still have my first client, Betty Gerstein, and she's probably listening to this right now, and she's mad that I used her last name, but she's the best. And like you said, I only have 5 or 6 people right now, because obviously I chose to do that, but I don't care I had an app already ready to go, but even if you didn't, if they love you, if they love what you're doing, if you have a great connection, you could send them. By the way, this is what I did with Betty, because she doesn't like the app. I sent her a Word document with her program on it, and she loved it. She was like, this is excellent. Oh, my God, it's great. So like you said, if you're already doing the right things, if you listen to a lot of these rules in this book, then you're going to change some of the way you might do a few things, and you're not going to have to worry so much about that. Yeah, you're going to lose some people, of course, but it won't be in this one big wave. I know a couple gyms right now that are just, they got destroyed, even though they're reopened here in New York, and they can't make it up anymore because we don't have the new clients. And so they lost these. I always say it's gold. You have gold inside your facility, and you're giving it away by trying to get newer clients, and it's coming back to bite them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go over the first 6 rules of the book, because we go over the first. You have the ground rules first, then you go over some deliberate practice. I want people to understand that you're going to get a great exercise. I want you to go over that, but I really love this context matters. I have to say the first quote: "The knife you cook with is the same knife that can kill you." Context matters. So talk to us about this.
Yeah, so I set up the book so in the book, I didn't want to have, after each rule, have it say, it depends. Because the answer for every training question is, well, it depends. So with rules, you have to be pretty specific with rules. And a lot of people don't like rules because they confine you to a box. Now, I want you to think of these rules as a way that there's a guide, or there's, again, that path that leads you to a better question, which leads you to a better answer. So I don't want you to think of it as being confined to a box. And the answer, yes, is always, it depends. So if you read the rules, you'll be able to apply 80% of these rules to most situations. Not every situation. I always use the example of the Certified Functional Strength Coach course. The Certified Functional Strength Coach course is a terrible course for training Olympic lifters. It is a terrible course for training power lifters. That is not what the course is made for. The course is made for the average person and the average athlete, and adapting the program to their abilities. If you want powerlifting or you want Olympic lifting, then you're going to have to go to an Olympic lifting coach or do an Olympic lifting program or a powerlifting program. And for example, during the CFSC courses, whenever somebody raises their hand, they say, well, what about the person that has a bad left shoulder? What do you do with them? And you're like, well, okay, you use your regressions and progressions, but that person falls into the 20% of that this program might not be, or this course might not be right for that person. So I kind of wanted to set up my book like that like this book is is the lens through which I see training through, and my world is colored by being brought up through the Mike Boyle strength and conditioning system. There's a lot of Dan John stuff in here. There's a lot of people through Perform Better. Now there's hundreds and hundreds of other coaches and systems out there. So not everything that you're about to read or go through is going to apply to whatever it is you do. So if you are going to send me that email and say, well, what do you think about this person? Does that person fall into that rule? The answer is probably no, they don't, because it depends. Context changes the answers for most things. So because one person's warm up is another person's 1 rep max. So I have athletes come in who deadlift double body weight, a bunch of glute hip lifts. There's just a warm up. I have someone who's in their 60s who hasn't done anything in 20 years. 10 hip lifts might make them feel like they just deadlifted 400 pounds. So again, it's all context dependent. And I wanted to make that my first rule and get that out of the way, because that sets up the rest of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about this, but rule number 2, good in theory, not in practice, right? I mean, right. It's this idea of, you're looking at these programs and the story you told, and, I thought it was good on paper, but then when you actually did it, and that's an important piece, is why you open, train smarter and harder. It's why I still train a little bit. It's why Mike still goes into coach, because it's an important piece. Right.
Yeah. And I can't answer questions thoughtfully if I'm just spitting out theory and I haven't done it in practice. that's not really a complete answer, and that's not who I want to be as a practitioner and as an educator, because that doesn't really get me through my goals of making exercise the number one prescribed drug in the world, because I have to give out good information in order for that to happen.
Absolutely. And this is another big one from Mike, and I'm sure I forget what book it was in. When you know the rules, you can break the rules.
Right. And again, the idea of the rules are that they are a guide. And then after you understand the trade, right, once you know what's inside of the box, then you can begin to start working outside of the box and be more creative. But there's this big push over the last few years to be more creative, to create something new, to create something innovative. And it's like, okay, I understand that, that's great, but you need to know how the system works first. Most likely through the first 3 to 5 years of your career, then you can start working outside of the box and creating your own systems and sprinkling in other things. And so I love this John Wooden quote: if you spend too much time learning the tricks of the trade, you might not learn the trade. So learn the trade first, then apply the tricks.
Absolutely. Good stuff. And rule number 4 is really what somebody had asked me one time about Coach Boyle in terms of what was the biggest thing that you really took away from him. This is early on in my career, and I always said, he gave me the right to be wrong, or to say I was wrong, or to admit I was wrong. And I always loved, Tom Myers came to Perform Better one year, it was first year of Perform Better. He said, the first thing he said was, 50% of what I'm going to tell you today is wrong. The problem is, I just don't know which 50%. So rule number 4 is I reserve the right to change my mind. And it's just this idea that we really, we want to keep learning, and we want to understand that what we know now is as much as we understand through the research, through experience, through everything. But it doesn't mean it's really always the right way. It's just the best we know right now.
Right. And it's so funny you used that quote from Tom Myers, because that's originally the quote that I had in here, but it didn't have enough context to it for people to understand where it came from. But that was one of my favorite memories from Perform Better is, 50% of what I'm about to tell you is true. I just don't know what 50%.
Yeah. I always love it.
And in this rule, I say, I hope 3 years from now that I don't agree with everything in this book, because that means that I have continued learning and I've changed my mind. So there's things that's why books have 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th editions. So I hope to write in 5 years the 2nd edition of coaching rules, where I update a bunch of these things because I don't agree with them anymore. So just know that when you pick this book up or hear this podcast from a year from now, I might not agree with all of it, maybe by even the time it's published, and I reserve the right to change my mind. So
there you go. And this is really, Mike, a big thing that we've all learned from Mike as well. And, your foundational rule number 5, steal smart people's shit. That's called learning.
Yep. And Pablo Picasso said it: good artists copy, great artists steal. And the point of writing this book and sharing this information is so that people will, the word steal it's kind of a play on words here. I obviously don't want you to copyright or plagiarize or anything like that, but I want you to take this information and use it and share it and give it to your people and post about it and ask questions about it. Like, that's the whole point of writing the book. I have nothing to hide. If anything, I want to give more of it away so that I can pursue more of my missions, because the more this book gets out, and I love the book by Ryan Holiday, Perennial Seller, that there's so many people out there that are afraid to give their book out in PDF, because what happens if that person forwards it to another person and somebody takes the ebook and gives them the login or the password? And it's like, well, that person probably was never going to read your book or buy it anyways. So if they stole it and read it, that's one more person that has eyes on your book, and maybe they'll buy the next one. So, or they at least know who you are now and maybe like what you have to say because they weren't going to buy it in the first place. So steal smart people. That's called learning. Yes, no, you don't want your stuff stolen. You don't want it plagiarized. But in the long run, if we're looking at this from a longevity perspective, or 50 years from now, I would rather have 10,000 people read my book than 100 who paid for it.
Yeah,
in the long.
It's true. And I think we worry about that. And for being a long time, partner at strengthcoach.com, I was always worried about, people like signing in under their, the other people's names and everything. And I was like, what? Who cares? Because first of all, it's just a minor percentage of people that are doing it. It always reminded me, Alan Cosgrove, he used to say, people used to ask him, hey, what if I spend all this time training my staff and they leave? And he would say, well, what if you spend all that time not training your staff and they stay? So, look, just do it, get the information out there and move on.
Right. And rule number 6, you'll never read the same book twice. So the goal of this book was, with the deliberate practice sections, was that you develop a relationship with this book so that you can keep coming back to it. And that I encourage people to read it once a year, to go through the deliberate practice sections once a year, because like I brought up with the surgeons, if you are not deliberately practicing surgery, you don't get better at surgery after 5 years of doing it. If you don't deliberately practice getting better at coaching and put yourself out there for criticism and feedback, then you will not improve after year 5. You will actually get worse if you do not have systems in place where you test, retest, and you have people giving you feedback on your abilities.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that. You have right after that, you have your deliberate practice, and you give a couple of exercises, and one is on coaching skills. Really important to do these. Talk to us about what you're asking people to do. Not that we want to give the whole book away, but
right.
Obviously they'll have to get the book to really dive deep into this.
So I'll just read the definition that I have in here for deliberate practice real quick. Deliberate practice refers to a special type of practice that is purposeful and systematic, whereas regular practice might include mindless repetitions. Deliberate practice requires focused attention and is conducted with a specific goal of improving performance. So with that definition in mind, exercise number 1, which goes with how should I coach, communicate clearly, you're going to take 5 videos of yourself as a baseline before you even read the book. You're going to take 5 videos of yourself coaching a squat, a push-up, a deadlift, a chin-up, and a front plank, just as if you were coaching a client or a group. Don't edit it. I want it to be authentic. I want it to be just off the cuff. How would you coach it to a group? Then I want you to film yourself coaching either a one-on-one client or a group session, and have your boss do it for you, ask a coworker to do it for you. The best teams in the world that win championships, or the best athletes in the world who win individual titles, watch film of themselves. It's the same thing you should be doing for coaching. Everybody has a cell phone. You have no excuse not to film yourself coaching and watch it over. Yes, it sucks. Nobody likes the sound of their voice. People ask Kevin and I how we got better at speaking. It was watching ourselves speak terribly for the first 5 years of our career before we even got a little bit better at it. And just watching the tape on yourself, like, ooh, I shouldn't have said that. Ooh, I used too many filler words. Oh, that was not what I wanted to say there. So like, you got to watch film on yourself. So that's deliberate practice number 1, section 1. Communicate clearly, and then halfway through or after you read the coaching communicate clearly section on how do I coach, there's 32 rules, and then you go through each and every rule, watching your videos over, and you say, ooh, I did that rule. Oh, I didn't do that rule. Oh, I got to work on that. I got to work on this. And I take you step by step in the deliberate practice section on how to improve on those videos, and then you refilm yourself And then you make yourself a video library with all of the exercises that you're going to create or that you use for your clients. So, and I think everybody now knows with the pandemic that if you don't have an exercise video library, you're behind in the coaching field. And it's a necessary evil. I get it. People don't want to do the technology thing. It's a pain in the ass to do. It's a lot of upfront work. But again, we're talking about client attrition. If you had the video set up and ready to go, you would have had time to, or you wouldn't have to spend a ton of time. You could have just made programs, set them up on an app, make the programs. So that's deliberate practice section number 1. Section number 2 is a programming audit. So this is keep it simple and do no harm. And what you do is you take 3 to 5 of your programs and you go through line by line. In every program, you ask yourself, why is this exercise here for this person? So you're going to defend your program like it's your dissertation for your PhD, or you're in a court of law and there's a judge and a jury. Why are you doing that foam rolling drill? Why are you doing that stretch with that person? Why are you doing that strength exercise? Why are you doing that conditioning drill? And I want you to go line by line and really challenge yourself, or have somebody else do it for you. I really encourage people to find another coach to do this with, and you could do that for each other's programs, or have, if you own a business, have everybody, Tim Concannon, who interned for me a long time ago, who owns his own gym now and had 4 or 5 interns. They used to have trainer court. So basically the trainer would go up and defend their program, and then it was everybody's job on the team to poke holes in your program. And you had to defend why you did this, why you did that. And I think it's a wonderful way to audit your programs and get better at programming. And the last one is, why do you coach, which is serve others. And so here is where you're going to reflect on what your legacy to be. Just an example for some of the questions. What kind of impact will I have on my clients, athletes, and community in the fitness field over the next 20 years? So we're thinking end in mind. What do you want to accomplish in the next 10 years? What do you need to accomplish in the next 3 year, 90 days? And then I want you to write a testimonial as if you're your own client. What do you want your client to say about training with you? And then there's a couple more exercises in the legacy section, but it's really getting you in that mindset of like, okay, what's the next 30 years or 20 years going to be like if I'm supposed to do this until I retire, if I want to make this a career, and then work backwards from there. Because if you can answer that question, then complacency, egotism, poor communication, lack of connection, overcomplication, and client attrition, those will all kind of fade away in the background if you have this 20-year window that you know you're going to be working with, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love it. I always,
that's the deliberate practice sections, and there's 3 of them in the book.
Yeah, there's 3 different deliberate that's one. You just went over one of them. There's more after each part in the book. And then I always love going back to that. Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy wrote a book called Living Forward, and in it, essentially what you're doing is writing your obituary. So it's the same idea. Like, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to say about you when you're gone? What do you want them, what is it? And if you can figure that out, then you start to, it answers a lot of questions, and you start to, hopefully your actions will be in line with those things, and you'll lead a pretty good life. So, very cool. I just want to mention, all right, so we have all these different, we're not going to go over any more rules just because you've gone over so many. Okay. But I love that you added like the summary of it. You added a rules list, an external cueing list, recommended reading. So there's a lot of stuff in here, but at the same time, this is really super easy to read. I was telling you earlier, at first I was like, oh man, a couple weeks ago, I was like, I got to read Brendon's book, And then I didn't realize it was like this, because I probably would have interviewed you a couple weeks ago when we originally had a plan. I'm like, I didn't have time. And I would have been like, oh, wait a minute. This is so easy to get through because you just kind of, you don't see this big long to-do list. Like, when you have a big to-do list, like for me, sometimes when I see a big book, I'm like, oh, I got to get into that and figure all this out. But this was really done. And you stayed true to one of your rules, communicate clearly, and actually 2 to your rules, keep it simple. And although you didn't do any harm to anybody, and you certainly served. So 3 out of 4 with this book. There you go. You served others. Go. So, Brent, thanks for coming on and doing this. And wow, we've been on for over an hour, and just been a great conversation about putting really everything from your career together. You've been talking about a lot of this stuff for a long time. And when is the book? Do we have a date on this?
Yeah, the November 15th, it'll be available in paperback and on Audible. I also did the Audible reading, read my own book, which was an interesting experience.
Nice.
It was fun, but interesting.
Cool. And
you realize there's not a lot of quiet around anywhere anymore.
Yeah.
Because you got to be really, really quiet the whole time. It was hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so let me ask you though. I know you've given away a lot of stuff. Be Like the Best is part of that. TrainCoach.com is part of that. When does that end? Is that going right up until launch day, or?
So that actually, we had so many people offer to give great prizes that the sweepstakes for the book tour actually now goes until the day before Thanksgiving. So November 24th, we have so much to give away. It was we got up to 105 prizes and over $20,000 worth of fitness educational content. So we still have 65 prizes left to give away.
How can people get involved with that? Be part of that?
So the sweepstakes, well, if you go to BrendonRearick.com, so BrendonRearick.com, you can find all of this stuff there. So you can find the book, you can find the sweepstakes and how to enter. You can find any other information you would want to find on me there. So that would be the simplest way to go about it. Yeah.
All right.
There's also a coaching rules course that I made. So if anyone's looking for mentorship to go along with the book, basically what I do is take you through each of the deliberate practices, and we have a coaching call every week. That would be coaching-rules.com. So coaching-rules.com. And you can also find the book there and a way to get to my sweepstakes as well. So those are the 2 spots.
Very cool. Make sure we have links to that on the show notes. So Coaching Rules, a how-to manual for successful career in strength and fitness. Definitely going to be on the short list for books you need to make it in this profession. So Brendon, thanks again for coming on and going over Coaching Rules.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.